मसनवी मौलवी मानवी हस्त कुरान दर ज़बान पहलवी. Masnavi of Maulana Rumi is nothing but the Quran in Persian. Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about Rumi. We are going to look at the first verses of his unrivaled epic poem known as the Masnavi. Who was Rumi? Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi was born in Balkh. His real name was Muhammad. His family lineage can be traced back to the first Caliph Abu Bakr. He was born in a household where theology and philosophy were already the main subjects under discussion. His father Bahauddin Walad was a prominent mystical theologian, author and teacher. After some time, the family had to leave Balkh and went to the center of knowledge at the time, Nishapur. At the time when they reached there, Fariduddin Attar's fame had reached its peak, and there is a legend that Rumi as a child met Attar, and Attar already could see a different child in him. Later Rumi would say the highest praise for his spiritual teacher, and no other verse comes close to praising Attar as does this. Haft shehre ishq ra Attar gasht, ma hanoz andar khame yakhu chaim. Attar has crossed all the 7 valleys of love, and we are stuck at the corner of the first street. But Nishapur was always too full of knowledge. Rumi and his father were in search of passion. In Sufi poetry there are 2 poles, knowledge and passion. Sufi poetry started off as wisdom poetry from Sheikh Sinai of Ghazni, who preceded Attar, and in his poetry we find wisdom with not so much passion. In his poetry the focus is on the purification of the intellect. Then the latter stage in Sufi poetry, represented by Attar, infused passion into the intellect. In Attar we feel the words and also understand them, whereas in Sinai we just understand without our spine feeling any tinge. The infusion of passion was finally completed in Rumi, in whom we feel the verse before understanding a word of it. Even though Rumi wrote his verses almost 700 years ago, and though his native language was not Persian proper, but his verses have a smooth flow of effect that goes straight to the heart, and then the adrenaline seeps into the intellect, convincing it that the ruler must be the heart, not the mind. Nishapur was not the city of passion for Rumi. He had not yet found exactly his kind of expression. After leaving Nishapur, the family traveled to Konya via different cities and towns and finally decided to stay there. In Konya, Rumi started composing verses on his own and teaching theology, philosophy and every other major subject of the time that could wake the soul up. But at the same time, he was also waiting for the wake-up call himself. He was not yet Rumi. He was yet Muhammad, son of Bahauddin Walad. Then one day in Konya, the day which would transform not just Rumi's life but also everyone else's life throughout history who would read Rumi, he met a dervish who had arrived most probably from Damascus and was known to be in search for someone while roaming on streets. This dervish was the sage named Shamsuddin Tabriz. When Rumi got to know about him, he went to see him immediately and then became Rumi. Shams had finally found the disciple he was looking for, and Rumi had finally found the master he was looking for. They would spend time together, and Shams would pour his fill of passion into Rumi's heart, so much so that Rumi's students saw their teacher neglecting his duties and spending time in a spiritual trance-like state which no one could get. No one could understand what was happening, but Shams understood. He had given his fill of wine to Rumi, and one day he disappeared and went to Damascus. Rumi fell sick after he got separated from his master. He felt the separation so much that Shams had to be brought back from Damascus and Rumi got some respite. But soon all those envious of passion again started to look at Shams as the problem, and this time round he literally disappeared. Some say he was killed, some say he fled, but whatever the reason, after this brief second meeting, neither Rumi nor the world saw this sage again. Rumi, in his silent wailing, used to walk the street of Konya, and there once he heard the sound of flute. He immediately wrote down a verse which later became the magnificent and without doubt the most famous first line of an epic poem. So let's open the book and read the first line of this passionate wisdom. Let's see what we find as our very first encounter. He begins, Bishno azne chu hikayat mi kunad. Listen to the reed, what wisdom it is imparting. Bishno, listen. The very first word is an imperative. Immediately Rumi wants us to turn our attention to his music. It is like an old friend who has suddenly met you and in an informal tone is immediately calling your attention. Listen! This is a novel way of starting a Sufi poem. Earlier Sufi poets like Attar in his Mantiq-ut-Tair, the conscience of the birds, begins with a long praise of God and then praise of prophets, and then they began the main part of their poem, so to say, the real story. Here in Rumi we find a different style. That is why it is said that even if anyone is a master of Persian poetry, even if the reader has learnt his poetry from Firdausi, Attar, Hafiz and Sanai, whenever he encounters Rumi's Masnavi for the first time, he would feel that now he would finally commence his learning of Persian poetry. Rumi grinds words into their purest form. He uses words like slaves. He uses the form of poetry as he wants it. His poetry is so pure that it has become the standard of judging others' poetry. Listening to him touches the soul, and it seems like this music is not of this world. And this is precisely why Rumi does not begin with the imperative, understand, or see, or let's go, or think. No. He starts the dialogue without even asking your permission. In fact, he gives an imperative. He beckons you with music. And what a music. Yes, Rumi, we are listening. We are listening. But who are we listening to? A reed. Bishno azne chu hikayat mi kunad. In Sufi poetry, there are two metaphorical allegories that have yet to be surpassed by any poet since. Attar the Simurgh and Rumi's Ne or reed. How does the reed make sound? It is not just any piece of wood. It is taken out from the bark of tree and then it is purified from within and becomes empty from within. But that still does not give us the music. The reed also needs to be holed in. It must empty itself a bit more. It must suffer a bit more so as to create that music which affects us. The reed is the symbol of the soul, just like the reed needs to be purified from within to create passionate music. In the same manner, every soul needs to unburden itself from the impurities within so that it can become light and ready for the flute player to play its music through it. But what is this reed saying? After such purifying process, what does this pure music beckons to? Rumi continues. Bishnu azne chu hikayat mi kunad was judai ha shikayat mi kunad. Listen to the reed. What wisdom is it imparting? Of what separation does it lament? The reed is cut from the bark. It has been separated from its original source. It has been cut off from the roots that gave it water and food. Now it is alone. Nonetheless, the source still stands. It is not that the tree was cut from the roots to make the nay. No. The separation of the reed does not kill the tree, it just takes a part away for which it yearns, and the reed sings of the pain of its separation from its source. Just as the soul yearns for the days when it was free from this material burden, when it was pure of desires, envies, lust, power, wealth, and property, the moment when it felt one with its source, and now the separation comes at the cost of these blinding forces. They create a worldly screen that keeps the soul trapped in this heavy clot of clay. Its flight is oppressed by this storm of dust wrapped around it. These different experiences of the world are like nets thrown on the soul that gets entrapped every time with a new trick of the evil, vicious world. The reed laments, Khazne stan tha mara bubrida and dar nafiram mardozanna lida and. Ever since they cut me down from the forest, my lamentations have caused everyone to weep. It remembers its heyday when water reached it and gave it life. Now it sings its music and seeks water from the tears of the listeners. But do not be mistaken, this is not a music that you will have a sympathy for, like usually we have for a person who we consider lost and from within we feel sorry. This is not the nature of the pain here in the music of the reed. The source of this pain that we feel is in the music of the reed, not in us. The music is too powerful that it moves us, it enraptures us, and it makes us say to the reed, keep on singing. You are also telling my tale. Keep lamenting, for this music was the one I had been looking for. Just like you are cut from the forest, I am also cut from the source. It touches the soul because it speaks to the soul. To reinforce the pain and ensure that the listener is completely in confidence regarding the pain, just to check if the listener also desires purity, to verify the purity of intention, the reed explains what kind of listener we ought to become, the exact one that it wants to speak to. Rumi writes, Sina khoham sharha sharha as firaq Tabe goyam sharh darde ishtiyaq. I seek a heart tormented with separation, so that my pain can be understood. Those who seek truth prepare themselves for suffering and torment. Just like the purity of gold can only be understood by a goldsmith, the language of pain can only be understood by those who have suffered on the way of truth. Those who relish in pain, it is not because they are morbid, but because as soon as they hear the music coming from the source from which they have been separated, they immediately hurl themselves in that direction. Just like in a crowd, a mother can recognize the sound of his child. A lover who has sought his beloved for a long time, when he finally hears the voice of pain, he recognizes this is the one. Rumi is the one. And the more we listen to him, the more we become aware of the distance, distractions, and all the obstructions that are keeping us apart from tasting properly the wine of passion. The pain increases after realizing that it is still a long way to go, and simultaneously it also convinces us of the worth of our suffering and prepares us to be patient and suffer. Because one day will come when this play of evil vices will come to an end, and this curtain of worldly desires will run its course. I will conclude with Rumi's master Attar's expression of the loneliness in this valley of love. Chunest hech marde dar ishq yar mara, sajjada zahidara, durdo ki mar mara. Because nobody can be my partner in passion, give prayer mats to the dualist. Give me leftover wine and gambling cards. Thank you, everyone.